Hello everyone, it's Lisa. Today I'm going to be reading a new story for you guys. A little while ago someone contacted me about wanting to collaborate on a project for my channel, which involved writing for my Toreador character Celine, but because I'm already using her in the Vampire the Masquerade campaign, that would prove to be a bit hard, so we decided to create new characters with their own story. So far, Cam, has written the first chapter, in collaboration with me, of course, and I'll be reading it for you now. So, if you're listening, Cam, thank you again so much, both for writing the story and for being an awesome friend. I hope you enjoy and relax, and I'll see you again soon. Evening Star, Chapter 1. Sitting by the prince as he carries on with the trial has sickened me. This has always been his intention. My place is unfortunately on the prince's left side at any type of gathering. The sheriff, of course, is on his right. I've worked as his scourge for almost 150 years now. He tasks me with the very things I hate him for, the things that sicken me. This is much to his delight, of course. I know how overjoyed he is to see my reactions. As the trial carries on, I get a familiar sense of uneasiness. There is a young kindred on trial for siring a thin blood. This went against the Camarada's laws of siring without permission, a law I'm all too familiar with, and a general distaste and scorn against the thin bloods in general by the older, more pure kindred. It becomes quite obvious that the prince doesn't intend to be lenient. I can feel his gaze on me as if he were staring in my eyes during the entire proceedings, even though he wasn't. After hearing her tell him that she wasn't sorry for what she had done, he ordered her execution. The sheriff, Azil, a very old and strong Bruja, moved in position and even more quickly decapitated her with a single swing of his claymore. I shook and looked away, gritting my teeth and trying not to show the emotion that I knew the prince was looking for. He always notices my most subtle reactions, though. "Are you quite all right, Sebastian?" he asks as he glides his bottom lip over his fangs. "Yes, Prince van Leeuwen, as always." He stared at me with peering yellow eyes. He knew what these proceedings did to me. "Good. I have a task for you." I peered at Azil out of the corner of my eye. "Does he actually work around here?" Both he and the prince chuckled. "Well, of course he does. You know this firsthand." I knew exactly what he was referring to, but I brushed it off the best I could. "However, this task is more suited to your skills. I have Azil working on a possible sabbath issue here in Amsterdam." I tied my dagger around my waist and fastened my sword and sheath over my shoulder. "What do you need me to do, Prince?" I said with a slight tone of rebellion in my voice. A familiar, sinister smirk appeared on his face as he handed me a piece of paper. "This is a fellow Toreador of yours. We found that she has illegally sired a human and has been evading us for a few weeks now. I would like you to find them and eliminate them. I have no time to have a public trial for each offender." I stared at the paper, not reading it but entranced by my own thoughts of anger, fear, and sadness. "Sebastian? Sebastian," he said loudly, which snapped me out of it, and I peered right at him. "Is this a problem? I assumed you could handle it." He had that same smirk he had since he handed me the warrant. "No, sir, I'll take care of it," I said, with gritted teeth. "Good, and be quick about it, would you? I haven't time for any more delays." I nodded and made my way to the door. Azil looked at me as I reached the door and stopped me by putting his hand on my shoulder. "I don't want to have to clean up after you any more." I whipped his arm from my shoulder and bared my fangs. He laughed as he always does, and I left through the door, angry as I always am. Before setting out on my task, I made my way to my apartment. I need to think and reflect. One thing I already knew before I set out was that I wasn't going to kill them. I couldn't. The prince sent me out on these kinds of tasks intentionally. The prince and I have quite a bit of history, a history I'm not sure if I want to forget or not, depending on my mood that day. Before I was kindred, I was very misguided. I lived in with my mother and father in our farmlands outside of Amsterdam. My childhood wasn't very normal by any means, as much as I remember from it. I haven't been human in over 200 years after all. My mother was a sweet woman. She was very warm and caring, although the strange thing is that it wasn't towards me. The only thing my mother ever seemed to care about was my father. He was a drunkard, he was a fiend, and I hated him. He was very violent towards her. He was always drunk and either at least belittled her or struck her nightly. After all that, though, she still loved him, lived for him, and would be lost without him. I watched this repeat night after night for about 19 years. One night was worse than the others, the night that I couldn't bear seeing my mother's blood drip from her nose for one more night. Enraged, I grabbed a kitchen knife and I killed the bastard, for everything that he'd done to her and anything that he's ever said to me. What I didn't know about that night was that it was the night that would change me forever. Taking another's life isn't something that you move past like it was necessary. Even these days, when my existence is surrounded by the lives that either I take or are taken around me, I feel I lose a little bit of my soul each time. That is, of course, if I really have a soul left. Who knows? Maybe the real me died 200 years ago along with my father. My mother was devastated by his death. I sort of expected this. My mother never really said much to me since I was a child. A couple of days after my father's funeral, she finally said something to me. It just ended up being the last thing she ever said to me. I have a hard time remembering some of these events from back then, but her words that night will stay with me for a millennia, if I make it that long. I loved him, you know. You took that love from me. Demon child is what you are. I want you to leave and never come back. Pretty straight to the point, I'll give it to her. I smiled to myself. It might be a little masochistic, but I was sort of happy that it was the first time she's ever looked like a strong woman to me. Devastated, of course, I left and never came back as she commanded me. I wish nothing but happiness for my mother, and if it was me that made her unhappy, I was reluctantly glad to leave. I spent about a year on the streets, fending for myself. Most of the year I spent very sick, hungry, and weak, scavenging scraps of food if I could find, fighting off people that wished to do me harm, with not much success, of course, and just trying to survive the cold nights. One night, during a cold December, I stumbled to the part of a city that I've never been to. Big houses, wealthy-looking people, and warm-looking places to sleep. Most people stayed away from me, and by the look on their face, probably weren't sure if I was a human or an animal of some type. It didn't bother me, of course. I was used to the staring. I found my way in a warm alleyway next to a tall house. I rummaged through their discarded trash, hoping to find something to eat and things to cover me up, as it was a night colder than all the rest. This was the second night that would change my life forever, but in a much different way than the first. "Hey," I heard a voice call out. Startled, I jumped up and started to run. As sick as weak as I was, I didn't expect to make it far, and was ready for the ensuing battle that I experienced most nights when trying to steal food. What I expected even less was how quickly I felt a grasp on my arm, which was strong and firm, to stop me and turn me right around. I cowered, expecting to be struck by a very strong and angry man. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you, sweetheart. Are you okay?" I looked back at this person wide-eyed after hearing the voice closer. It was a woman, the most unthreatening person I may have ever seen. She was beautiful, with flowing dark brown hair and bright, glowing yellow eyes that seemed to be reflecting the moonlight. Yes, I'm sorry, I'll leave," I stammered. I remember her laughing at my vulnerability. I suppose she found it adorable. "No, you don't have to leave. You look hungry and tired, my dear. Why don't you come in?" I backed away, confused. No one had ever offered me anything, let alone the kindness in those words. They sounded too good to be true. She smiled at me with squinted eyes, the smile that would end up being my favorite thing about her. "There's no reason to be afraid. I won't hurt you. My name is Amelia. What's yours?" I stared at her, rather confused. There was no reason for her to be so concerned, but I probably needed her help more than anything, so I didn't refuse her. "I'm Sebastian. Thank you, miss. You're very kind." She took me by the hand and led me to the front door of her house. "Please, go in. You can bathe upstairs and there are warm blankets in the guest room. I'll return shortly. I don't keep much food in the house, I'm afraid, and I must find you some fresh clothes. Those rags are dreadful." I remember feeling bad because I didn't say much when we first met. I think over that year I'd forgotten how to interact with another person. "Thank you," I said, staring at the ground. I felt tears well up thinking about not being cold for a change. She walked over to me and placed her hand on my chin. "Of course, my dear. Now, go on. I'll return shortly." I looked up at her with tears, and again she smiled with squinted eyes, which I learned would be her trademark smile in the coming years. I made my way upstairs to the bathroom. Amelia had quite a collection of old possessions. Even for the 1800s, some things looked very antique to me at the time. I found it odd that she had paintings on every wall in the house. I did enjoy art, and there were some really beautiful pieces that looked older than even this house. I thought nothing more of it, and I walked into the bathroom. I ran the water in the bathtub to about as scorching as I could possibly handle, and hurried in as my excitement made me laugh loudly with joy. It felt amazing. For a while, seemingly hours, I just lay in the water, almost falling asleep from the pure comfort. I washed away a year's worth of dirt from my body and scrubbed my hair until it felt clean, and then some for good measure. I wasn't exactly sure when this opportunity might arise again. As I got out of the bath, I grabbed a towel from next to the sink to dry myself. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. It was strange, since that was maybe the first time I've seen what I looked like since leaving my home. I had longer hair down to my shoulders, and I could see some of my original blonde that had been covered by mud and dirt up until now. I was thinner, which didn't surprise me. I can't remember the last time I had a proper meal. All in all, it was nice to see that I was still me after everything that had happened. Amelia said she had blankets in the guest room, so I made my way over there. It was down quite a long hallway, so I took the walk as a chance to mull things over. I wondered why she was being so nice to me. I didn't see any reason why anyone would offer a night of warmth to me. I wondered if maybe not everyone is as cruel as the others can be. I entered the guest room. On the bed was a neatly folded pile of clothes with a note on it. As I examined the clothes, I noticed that the fabric felt wonderful. The shirt was made of a rich blackened silk, and the pants a dark linen. These clothes were expensive. How could she be so kind as to give these to me? I hoped not to offend her by denying her generosity, so I fit myself into the clothes, which felt warm and comfortable. I picked up a note that was written in gorgeous handwriting and scented paper that smelled as she did when I first met her. The note said, "When you are ready, please join me in the dining room. I would love to hear your story. E." She signed it with a curved cursive E next to the stamp of a thorned rose. I was nervous. How do I thank the person that may have saved my life, if only for a night? Whatever the reason, I plan to let her know how thankful I am. I walked slowly down the long, winding staircase, stalling a little bit, thinking of how to properly show my appreciation to Amelia. I didn't have much practice in gratitude. There haven't been many occasions lately where I needed to use it. I hoped that I looked presentable. Amelia was quite striking, and I didn't want to assault her by not looking my best. I reached the bottom step and turned towards the dining room. As I entered, Amelia looked at me and smiled as she leaned against the table. "Oh my, you are quite handsome when you're all clean." I looked away and blushed. Thank you. I didn't mean to be rude, but can I ask you a question? She rose from the table with an intrigued look. Of course, my dear. Ask me anything you wish. I furrowed my brow as I hoped not to insult her. Why are you showing me such kindness? I don't understand. Amelia walked over to me and placed a finger under my chin to lift my eyes to hers. They were still a glowing yellow, even without the moonlight. As odd as it seemed, I doubted at the time that it could be anything out of the ordinary. You've seen a lot of cruelty during your time out there, I imagine. How long have you been on your own? I had to stop and think for a moment, as I wasn't exactly sure. Beyond thinking, it had been a year after seeing a second winter. It must be around a year now, I'm not sure. I've lost almost all sense of time, as strange as that may seem. She smiled at me and let out a laugh. That is not as strange as you might think, my dear. I can relate to that feeling. She leaned in closer to me as if to sample my scent. Please, sit down and eat. I know you must be quite hungry. There was a wide array of different food she laid out on the table, some I hadn't seen before. This was the most amazing food I've ever seen since I left the farm. Trying not to be too hypnotized by my coming feast, I noticed Amelia making her way towards the door. Are you not hungry? I called out to her. She seemed taken aback by the question, as if not expecting me to ask. Oh, no, my dear, I don't eat too much, I'm afraid. I do have something I must attend to. Will you please stay here tonight? I would be delighted to see you again. I gave her a nod. I couldn't resist the kindness in her words. She gave me her signature squinted smile and quickly left through the door. What I didn't know is that that night would mark the coming end of my human life. With that comes the knowledge of truth. The truth of this world is that humans are blind to the real cruelty happening in the shadows. She was my break from cruelty, both as a human and as a kindred. I laughed to myself. I hadn't reminisced like this in a while. Maybe it's because I stare at this warrant and see these two in the same situation. Even worse, they are Toreador. It's almost as if I'm looking past who is actually on this piece of paper, and I stare into the eyes of Amelia and myself. I decided to waste no more time. I know what I need to do, and I need to do it quickly. I grab a key from my safe, and a couple blood packs from my emergency stash. With a bounty like this on their heads, I'm sure they found it difficult to feed. According to my personal contacts on the street, a couple timid kindred have been staying at a local beach, not too far from my apartment. I grab my coat and head over that way. As I arrive on the beach, nothing of interest catches my eye. They appear to not be there. I know better, though. I close my eyes and focus on my sense of smell. After many years of training with very skilled Toreadors, my skill and senses are unrivaled by most kindred. I smile to myself. I'll have to thank the prince for that opportunity one day. The first scent that caught my attention was the water. It smelled just as I always remembered it, beautiful. It didn't help that with such a bright moon tonight, it was even more appealing to the eye. I let out a laugh when I realized how distracted I was. Amelia always told me that this was her curse as a Toreador. Still, to this day, I couldn't ask for a more wonderful affliction to be cursed with. I needed to refocus, and in doing so I caught a smell that was unfamiliar. It was the scent of a kindred, 2 of them, actually. One smelled quite young. It must be them, and the scent was coming from under the boardwalk to my far left. I quickly undid my weapon belts and laid them in the sand. I know you're both there, I called. I don't wish to hurt you. Please come out so we can talk. I heard a sharp voice come from under the pier. I know you are the scourge of the prince. What other reason would you be here than to kill us? I was surprised that she would recognize me from that distance, but it was of no matter. If you know who I am, then you know I mean to kill you. I wouldn't bother asking you first. As if those were the magic words, she and her child moved out from the shadows and walked to me. She looked at me with stern eyes. So, Scourge, if you don't wish to harm us, then why are you here? I pulled my hood down, hoping to show sincerity in my eyes. I want to help you. I have no wish to kill you and your child unnecessary. She looked at her child up and down, who remained silent. I love him, truly. The prince is cruel to deny me the right to be with him forever. When she said that, I realized something that I've only slightly considered until now. The prince had organized this. He had denied permission to a Toreador wishing to sire for love. Knowing that she would go against his wishes, he would be forced to order me to kill them. I grimaced as I thought of how much I hated that bastard. Look, my dear, if anyone can sympathize with your feelings, it's me. Please, trust me. She looked at me and nodded, realizing that I truly wished to help. Take these blood packs. I know you must be hungry. She grabbed them, smiled, and gave one to her child. This is the key to my boat. Go to the docks, take it, and leave the city. You'll never be able to come back here, but you will live. A look of gratefulness was clear in her eyes, and she threw her arms around me in a hug and thanked me. Make haste, please. There's not a moment to waste. She nodded, grabbed her child by the hand, and turned to walk towards the dock. Unfortunately, as they make it a few steps away from me, I heard a familiar sound that I was dreading to hear the entire night, the sound of whistling metal through the air. No later than when I first heard the sound, I looked towards the two kindreds to see Azael's signature steel glaive pierce the neck of the younger and decapitate him with ease. A spark and a plume of ashes burst from what was once his body. His sire screamed in horror at seeing her love see the final death, and as I reached out in a futile attempt to save her, Azael was already in front of me, swinging down his claymore and decapitating her with as much ease as the child. I stood there, frozen in horror, as I felt a single tear of blood escape my eye. I knew I would have to clean up after you, he bellowed with a grin on his face. The prince will be delighted to hear of your disloyalty. I still don't give him attention, as if to disregard his words as I fight back tears. He leaned a little closer to me. It looks like you still have a soft spot for that whore sire of yours. What was her name? Amelia? My eyes snapped up to meet his and his menacing gaze. I delivered a swift kick planted right on his temple. He flew back a few feet before hitting the sand with a slide. Azael may have been much stronger than me, but he would never match my speed. I walked up to him as he begins to get up from the ground. Tell the prince whatever you wish, but note this: if you ever mention her name again, I will kill you. He laughed and wiped the blood from his face. Well then, I look forward to the day it slips out next. I looked away and started back towards my apartment. There will be quite a discussion between the prince and I tomorrow. I might as well be prepared.